Recording progress.
Hey, everybody. It's 2:07 p.m. on Sunday, November 10th. Getting to this podcast a little later than normal today because I wanted to do some really fun things with my son for a bit of time. And those two fun things were watch some football and eat some pizza. And look, I got to tell you that both of those are pretty high on my list for what we call fun or self-care or kind of just the kind of respite, and refresh time. And this podcast today is about that kind of process of what we'll call recovery and refresh, or maybe it's just refresh. When you lose difficult elections, and I've been thinking about this. Certainly, I've in my adult lifetime, when I've really cared substantially about elections, there have been some devastating losses. There was 2000, the presidential election. There was 2010 with the Tea Party victory and sweep of the House of Representatives. There was 2014 with a very strong Republican success that gave them control of the Senate, which allowed Mitch McConnell in 2016 to not seat a Supreme Court justice when there was an opening and Barack Obama had an opportunity as a president to appoint a justice. 2016 was obviously crushing. And in 2024, okay, all of these are really difficult. And it would be silly to not know that those have been incredible lows. But there's also been these incredible highs along the way as well. 2006, when the Democrats gained control back of the House and the Senate. 2008, with Barack Obama's great victory and the Democrats' great success. 2012, with Obama's reelection. 2018 with the blue wave, 2019 in Virginia and in Kentucky, where we did a lot of work for Common Power. 2020, magical. 2022, beating the odds. 2023, winning again in Kentucky and flipping the Supreme Court in Wisconsin. So there are these both sides of the coin, and we don't do anybody any good if we are done when the pain is there. Like I firmly believe that we should only be done after the mountaintop, after a mountaintop moment, not after pain, because after pain becomes the kind of opportunity for learning, for growth, for redemption, for trying again, for trying and trying and trying again. So this podcast today is about that kind of refresh and trial again. And tomorrow on Veterans Day will be the last of these series of podcasts. Started these Withcp podcasts with Charles Douglas on July. I'm looking at my big calendar. On July 13th. And November 11th will be the end. And there'll be a symbolism to the Veterans Day close tomorrow that I'll talk about tomorrow when we do that podcast. But I'm going to do today's solo because Charles is engaging in some joy and some self-care himself. He's watching a movie that we referenced yesterday on our podcast, Wolves, on Apple TV with George Clooney and Brad Pitt, it's a buddy movie. And, it's one of those ones that Charles and I enjoy. We relate to those. And so I said, I texted him and said, join me for the podcast. And he said, watching Wolves. And I just said, it's a good move, man. It's a good move. It's a way to go. So I want to talk about and just reflect upon this truth, this reality that we need to fill our cup again with refreshment. It has to be done. And it is out of that refreshment that we can drink deeply and get refreshed and come back. And in some ways, we come back stronger because the difficulty, the challenges become part of the learning and the strategy and the successes going forward. So that's my Gatorade, getting those electrolytes. All right. I want to start with this photograph today that has gained a lot of traction on social media since it was published yesterday. And it's a photograph of Kamala Harris, Vice President Harris, playing a game, Connect Four, with granddaughters of hers. And it's a photo that you may have seen already. But it's the starting point for this podcast. This is not a tweet. It's on the social media channel Threads. It's a posting though by her sister Mina Harris, and it says, "Back to where it all began only a few months ago. My eternal gratitude to everyone who showed up. We love her so much." And there just is a truth here, a truth that life goes on, and it's up to us, the living, to decide what's going to happen, how we're going to go forward. And that is where the heartbeat of all of us comes from. And her, Vice President Harris's, sense of determination and fortitude and everything she poured into this campaign for months, and now to return to that fun with them and to get back to the kind of primitive familial relationships that nurture us all is a testament to every one of us. We should all kind of think about it this way, that to go back and to touch base with, or touchstone. This is where the touchstone phrase, the term touchstone, works so perfectly. To go back and touch the stone that is the rock for us of all of our lives is essential. And I am very much involved in doing this right now too, and everybody at Common Power is. We are all in our own ways doing that, because that's how you refresh and fill your cup and come back again tomorrow. And we are firmly going to be back. There isn't even a blip in our confidence in the work that we're doing. You can't win every election, but if you have the system that we're seeking to build, of education, of leadership development, of action, then no election is bigger than that system. The system is the right system. And we're thrilled about our education and our leadership development and about our action. So we're doing this self-care, which is, one of those jargony terms about taking care of ourselves. And that self-care happens for each of us in our unique ways. I'm watching football and eating pizza and reading a good book. I'll have a lot of cookies here shortly. I don't know if I've ever mentioned this before, but I love a good chocolate chip cookie. And I even more love a lot of good chocolate chip cookies. Among our colleagues, some are listening to music and going dancing. Some are watching movies. Some are spending time with family, and just hugs and conversations. Some are snuggling up with their pets, their cats, their dogs. Others going hiking, getting out into nature. Some are sleeping a lot. Some are cooking. I learned a word from these younger colleagues of ours, or a phrase on Friday. On Friday, today is Sunday, on Friday, where if you just hang out in your bed or on the couch, you are engaged in what's called bed rot, like like you're just rotting in your bed. And so, okay, all right. um, sometimes that's not a bad thing to do, to just fill the soul. So I watched this movie Wolves that Charles is watching now. I watched it on Friday night, and it was like, I don't know why, but it was the combination of the fatigue and the kind of finality of it all, of the week. And I was spending some time watching the movie with my wife, and she was in town for a bit of time and is now um, going back to California for health reasons for a chunk of time. And so it was a last evening for us to hang out, and we were watching this movie, and it was funny, it was clever, um, and it felt like one of those like moments where this is the greatest movie I've ever watched. Not because it was, but because of the moment and the value of it. So my hope and ask of everybody in CP Nation is that you are doing this too. If you're ballot curing, great. Make sure you're pairing that with some time to yourself. If you're doing your full-time jobs, please make sure that you're getting some weekend respites and some chances to fill your cup and your soul. All of us together. All right? All of us together. We lost this election, but we are not defeated in any kind of scope at all. One of the ways that I begin to feel refreshment is that my creative energies begin to develop and to percolate. And when I begin to feel that kind of generative creativeness or creativity, I can start to feel it in my heart and in my mind and my body. I can feel it. And I can feel that adrenaline and that sense of possibility and that sense of understanding and that sense of let's go. Let's effing go. All right. And that generative creativity is coming back for me already. I know that there is enormous pain for so many people and for this country and for the world coming from the Donald Trump presidency. That is real. But in the midst of that, our taking care of ourselves, our ability to refresh ourselves becomes absolutely essential. It has to be done, not because it's a selfish thing, but because we need to do it for everybody else's sake so that we can pour ourselves back out. And I'm starting to feel that. I woke on Friday morning starting to feel it. Or maybe it was even yesterday, Saturday morning, and I started to feel it. And I decided I wanted to do a lecture series, a course for the Institute for Common Power. And that course is now been put up on Eventbrite, and we're selling tickets, and it's going to happen starting November 19th for 3 Tuesdays in a row. And it's called Beating the Backlash. Beating the Backlash. And I think it is an objectively true statement that in the larger arc of American democracy, that the significant backlash that we are feeling post Barack Obama's election in 2008, that's what triggered it, and that it has gone out in kind of like waves, that the backlash in that period of time is significant, and that democracy is actually winning. I think that any single election cannot tell us that can only tell us a little bit. And the actual outcome of an election has to be thought through in the much larger arc of cultural time and development. And so I thought about this, and I thought about it some more, and I talked with Charles about it, and I talked with another colleague of mine about it. And I sat with it and ate some cookies last night thinking about it. And I really believe it. I really believe that democracy is winning, and that even in this election, the significance of some of our victories is very, very meaningful. The truth is, we got our butts kicked at the presidential level by Donald Trump. Okay. And that has tremendous implications for our country, for the world, for women, for people of color, for migrants, for the future of the Supreme Court. But that's not the entire story. And so I hope that you will come to this lecture series, these courses. They're going to be recorded so you can watch on your own timing. Obviously, one of them is on Tuesday of Thanksgiving week, so people may not be available to watch it live. But I didn't want to wait till maybe after the beginning of the new year. It's essential that we begin to see this now, and that I begin to experience that refreshment, because part of the refreshing for me is moving back into that process of thinking and understanding and then teaching. That is a heartbeat element for me. And so I'm back in, and I'm excited, and I hope you'll join me for that. That is only one piece of the path forward for Common Power. On Wednesday of this coming week, Dr. Hassan Jeffries will offer his own course, one lecture about where do we go from here. And at that event, Dr. Terry Scott is going to announce for the Institute for Common Power what we're calling our democracy curriculum for 2025. And it is spectacular. Okay. It is spectacular. And we are so excited about this. That's a part of what's coming and a part of what we're doing. I spent this morning talking to Mr. Charles Malden, a champion for Common Power and a civil rights living hero. And Mr. Charles and I talked about how he's feeling and the work that we do at Common Power, and a trip that he's going to join us for, a couple trips he's going to join us for, and about how that feels in terms of his schedule and his physical abilities. And I said to him, I said, I want to do this course on beating the backlash. And he said, I saw that. And I said, well, you're welcome to join us for that. And we talked about it, and he said, man, I've been watching backlashes in this country since 1865. And of course, he hasn't literally been here that whole time, but the point is well made. All right. And when I do this course on November 19th, November 26th, and December 3rd, I'm going to start in 1873. And we're going to be challenged, and we're going to be inspired. So my question to everybody is, what can you do to make sure that you're refreshed and that we're able to turn the page and to know and to engage very soon? We are not going to engage in the same kind of overt, constant, omnipresent resistance that we met Donald Trump's presidency with in 2017. That is not what this moment needs. We are here for the long haul. We have a system in place at Common Power. The left and the center left has some things to think about. And it is imperative that we be full and together. All right. Refreshed and together. And I know it wouldn't be appropriate for me to be excited or overly optimistic about where we are going because of the truth of this difficult moment, policy wise, relationally, the damage to a Ukraine, to a Palestine, just so many things that are coming to our country, to immigrants. But I know with everything that is possible to know, that actually the work that we are doing is winning. It is. And we cannot miss that because Donald Trump won the presidency. Kamala Harris up here ran an incredible campaign, 3.5 months of brilliance. Had she not run that campaign, we would have gotten completely wiped out politically, would have gotten completely wiped out. But she did. And all of us gave it everything we had. That's for darn sure. And because of that, we have limited the damage. We have limited it so far, and we will limit it going forward. And that is not a campaign slogan to run on, limiting the damage. You don't run on a slogan of like, we're going to limit the damage. But sometimes in the scope of the way the human pendulum swings, that's what you're doing. So I'll finish with this story. In 2018, Common Power started as an idea, and we sent volunteers across the country to work in different swing states. In 2019, we became an organization, and Charles was our first employee, and we began to raise money to build this organization. And we did not know what we would exactly build and how significant it would become. But we started. And we began to try. And there are no guarantees when you try that you're going to succeed. There are no guarantees. Especially when you bring together a group of people that, like, this isn't the professions that any of us were raised in. None of us, not Charles from Starbucks or me from the University of Washington or Marcy Douglas from her work for the city government, or, you know, others of ours who were still in school, some of them in high school of our colleagues when we started this organization. But you try. You try. And you try because you believe it's the right thing to do. And in 2019, we began to partner closely with an organization in Virginia called New Virginia Majority. And New Virginia Majority has been working since the early Obama years to build a better Virginia, a more inclusive Virginia, a more equitable Virginia. And they care about elections, but they care about, again, much larger, the larger quality of life and sense of livelihoods and full kind of democratic experiences of people in Virginia. And in 2019, our work in Virginia was a high water mark for us in that we sent a team of 70 plus people there in the last 2 weeks of that election, and we helped to elect a governor, a Democratic governor, and a Democratic House. This is 2019, and a Democratic Senate. And so for the very first time since the early 1990s, and then and many of those were Democrats of a different ilk altogether, the Democrats gained power again in the governorship together with the legislature in Virginia, and they won. And it was not a massive victory, but they gained control of the House and the Senate in Virginia. I got one fact wrong just now. In 2017, the Dems had won the governorship. In 2019, with our work, they won control of both state chambers. And that gave them the combination of the governorship with both chambers. And they set off and they started to pass really meaningful legislation, including protection of abortion rights, early voting opportunities in Virginia, no absentee voting, same-day voter registration. They passed a new Voting Rights Act, a state Voting Rights Act. And one of the leaders of this was a state legislator named Jennifer McClellan. And Jennifer McClellan was really close with New Virginia Majority. And so we had the chance in 2019 to meet Jennifer McClellan. And Jennifer McClellan was a strong leader in the state, was leading a commission known as the Martin Luther King Jr. Commission that helped to enact some new policies and eventually created this incredible, or led to the creation of this incredible monument called Emancipation. And so in Richmond, Virginia, there's this new monument, the Emancipation Monument. Okay, in 2021, we went back to Virginia. This was after the successes in 2020, and it was our very first work in the field again after COVID. We went back to Virginia, and in that election, the governor's race was now happening, and the House, all the seats in the House were up for election. Not the state Senate, but all the seats in the House. The Senate's every 4 years. The House is every 2. And in that election, the Democrats lost the governorship to Glenn Youngkin, and the Democrats lost control of the state House to Republicans. And a whole bunch of our staff were there on election night in Virginia. And it was very difficult. Very, very difficult. And it was important that we were there with them, because we don't quit when things are tough. And on that trip, I'm sorry, and then about a couple months later, in early 2022, we did another trip, this time a learning tour to Virginia. This time a learning tour. And we met with Jennifer McClellan at that Emancipation Monument in Richmond, Virginia. And she talked about how it got built and the different things that they sought to create here. And it's a spectacular monument. And she said to us there, as she spoke to our group, State Senator Jennifer McClellan, she said, "We need you to help us fight the backlash. That's what we're asking you." She said, because we have been able to have successes, and now we're facing the backlash. I think we're actually beating the backlash now. Even in an election defeat, there are many signs of a much longer arc that suggests that this is a difficult moment, but it is a difficult moment in a much larger arc that is moving positively. To fight the backlash is sometimes what we're called to do. We're sometimes called to do that. All right. It's not as gloriful, turning that into a verb. It's not as gloriful as climbing a mountain and standing on top of it and saying, we just elected Barack Obama, or we just elected Kamala Harris. Those moments are unfortunately fewer than we would ever want them to be in the United States. But common power is not a place that's in it for one election. It never has been. We're a place where we're in it for democracy, and democracy requires education, leadership development, and action. All three. And we are firmly committed to all three. And everybody listening to this podcast, you've helped us to get there, and we need you to come with us. All right? Our job is to fight the backlash that we've experienced since Barack Obama's presidency. And dang it, we're doing a good job. All right? On that Emancipation Monument, there are a series of folks in Virginia history who have fought for racial justice and democracy. And they are named around the base of the monument. And one of them is a gentleman by the name of Mr. John Mitchell. John Mitchell was the editor of a African-American newspaper in Richmond in the 1880s and 1890s. And I'm familiar with him because my dissertation research in graduate school was focused on the period from the end of the Civil War through the mid 1890s, looking at uh, the challenges around race and race relations in that period of time. And newspaper editors were very influential in that era. So I know who John Mitchell is, but I didn't know a lot about him. And he's one of the Virginians who's commemorated around the base of that monument. And there is a quote that Mitchell has in 1890. And it's when this Robert E. Lee statue or monument is being placed on what becomes known as becomes known as Monument Avenue. And Monument Avenue in Richmond was for a long, long time the most famous and revered kind of stretch of Confederate monuments in the country. And Robert E. Lee was the crowning achievement on this stretch of road. And this monument sat way, way, way up high. Robert E. Lee up on his horse. And it was a statement. It was an absolute statement by the white supremacists of Virginia that we're going to be here and always high up on our horse. And it went up in 1890. And it's probably the most famous Confederate monument in the country. It was for 120 years, 130 years to be exact. And it was torn down by activists after the George Floyd murder. They weren't actually able to bring it down. It was so strong, but they damaged it, and they compelled the Virginia legislature and the Richmond leadership to bring it down. Those activists did bring down a whole series of monuments along Monument Avenue, Jefferson Davis and Stonewall Jackson and Jeb Stuart. And they got the Robert E. Lee statue taken down eventually. And John Mitchell in 1890, when that statue had been put up, and there was a grand day, and thousands upon thousands of Virginians came and celebrated, all of them white, or almost every single one of them in 1890. John Mitchell wrote an editorial in his newspaper, and he said, "The black man is here when this monument went up, and the black man will be here when this monument comes down." That's his words. And in 2020, when that monument came down, the construction company that took it down was led by a local African-American man who took it down. It was 130 years after it went up. That is the kind of long arc that we are doing way better than. We are not in that moment and in that time. We are not. And yet we will be as determined. We will fight for common power. We will fight for our democracy. So everybody, we need you. We need you every step of the way. Democracy curriculum coming out next week. Our impact report capturing our work for this year coming out in 2 weeks. We're getting refreshed, folks. We're filling up. This may sound like an understated podcast because I'm just kind of like at a certain level emotionally, but that is a sign of me just like filling the strength, filling, Filling, and feeling the strength coming. We're in this together, folks. All right? We're in this together. We're going to be here tomorrow and every day going forward. All right. Take care of yourselves. Eat those cookies. And let's get to work. All right. Let's go.